Okay, so we're going live. Live from West Haven. It's Tuesday night live. Okay. All right, well, my name is Kim Hunter, and Emily is going to be my scribe today because I don't know how to use this whiteboard. If you'd like to write up there, CLIA. It's really cool to put on your business card that you're a member of the CLIA. It's like the CIA, but you have an extra letter. So that stands for Certified Landscape Irrigation Auditor. And so when I was in college, I took a bunch of horticulture classes. I have a degree in landscape architecture. That doesn't make me a specialist in watering or anything like that, but the reason I'm here is I had a concern about our water and the way that we water. So I did take a course in certified landscape irrigation auditing, and so a lot of my experience that we're going to talk about today is some of that. So, okay. I talked to the mayor back in March, and I told him I'd like to do a seminar, but I get tired of saying the same thing over and over, and so I'm grateful for West Haven City for allowing us to do this here for a bigger audience and to broadcast this. For those that might be watching, is there a way they can text or ask a question if they had one?
It's just a live stream.
Okay, there's a live stream without comments, but if you want to come to the nursery and ask me a question, you can. I am not here, I do have my Country Gardens Nursery shirt, but I'm not here to promote Country Gardens Nursery. I'm here to talk about watering and hopefully answer questions that you might have of the proper ways to do it. When I was a landscaper, in the wintertime there wasn't much to do, and so I would go substitute teach in the high school. I'd be a permanent sub for people who were out for a long time. And one time I was doing biology, and this girl asked, why do we have to learn this stuff? I'm not going to be a biologist. So today I'm going to take you back to biology, okay? So the first thing you need to know is the purpose of life. If I asked you what's the purpose of life, what would you say? Okay, that's a good answer. If you go to church, they're going to tell you something else, right? But for life on this earth, everything has one goal. It's to grow and reproduce itself, right? So a grass blade or a tree leaf or a flower, all these things are part of a life cycle of a plant. There's two differences between plants and animals. So what's one of those major differences? And I love questions, or I love answers. This is an interactive. So, okay, number one, 99% of the plants don't move. So unless you're an algae or plankton or something that flies in the air like a seed or something, once a plant plants its roots in the ground, it's stuck there, okay? What's the second difference?
Brains.
No, I don't know if plants have brains or not. I'm not going to argue about that, but there's something that plants do that we can't do.
Method of energy production.
Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, so plants make their own food. So those of you watching, you can't hear some of the audience members, so I got to repeat all that stuff, right? So if you want to write, plants make food, and plants are stationary. Okay, so plants make their own food using water, sunlight, and chemicals that they bring through their roots in a process called photosynthesis. So you learned about this in grade school, right? And then you thought, why do I need to know this? I'm never going to need to use this ever, right? Okay, if you want to make food, so I know Eric, I'm going to call on you. If you want to make pancakes, what do you need?
Pancake mix and water.
Okay, if you don't have pancake mix, what's in pancake mix for those of you that make it from scratch? Flour, milk, eggs, right? So you have all these different ingredients to make the pancakes. Now, when I was a kid, I made cookies. My older brother taught me how to make cookies, and I was just following him, and I made it in one of those Miracle Whip jar lids. So now part of today, you're supposed to be entertained. So this is one of the entertainment parts. So back, if you guys remember, if you're old like me, we used to have metal Miracle Whip lids, right? So my brother would make cookies, and I'd just kind of watch what he was putting in his dough, and then I would put some in. And when it came to salt, I was like, why are you putting salt in those? I want sweet cookies, not salty cookies. And he says, oh, yeah, you got to put salt. And so I put like a little pinch in, and he goes, no, you need more than that. And so I put a little more, and I mean, it was like 2 or 3 tablespoons of salt in this little Miracle Whip cookie. So I put my cookie in the oven with his, and it came out and it looked like a cookie, right? But it didn't taste like a cookie. Okay, so I had the wrong ingredients or the wrong types, right? So plants, in order to make their food, they've got to have the right ingredients. So some of those, the major ones, are nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK. So if you've bought a bag of fertilizer, that's what those 3 numbers mean. So if they don't have the proper amounts, then the plants aren't healthy, okay? So, all right, for those of you coming in, there's some handouts on this table. So. All right, so just like my cookie, if it turned out bad, sometimes you might see your lawn looking yellow instead of green. It should be dark green, right? Right now it's kind of stressed out because it hasn't had enough rain or moisture. But because the plants are stationary, like this gentleman suggested, they can't go out to the store and buy it like we can. We can go buy our stuff. And so our lawns and our gardens, when we are growing things, and those of you, how many of you mow your lawn and bag it? Anyone here? Okay, so some of you bag your lawn clippings and throw it away or throw it in a compost pile. Whatever you do, you're not returning it back to the grass. In the mountains, no one's out fertilizing the trees and shrubs, but their leaves, when they fall, no one's raking those up. They just kind of decompose and go back into the soil, and so it's just returned. If we grow a garden, you guys eat that produce, you take it out, and so all those nutrients that plant used to form that produce, you've just taken out of the soil and taken from it. So that's why we have to fertilize and rejuvenate our plants. So to be healthy, now let's talk about grass, because that's why I really wanted to talk about watering. Every time we mow our lawn, so what's the purpose of life again? To grow, right? To grow and be happy. The grass wants to be happy. But when we go in, and so do you have a green marker that shows, or? Okay, how good are you at drawing grass?
Not very good.
Just draw, yeah. Okay, so here's our little grass, and we come in with our lawnmower, and we chop off. Can we erase like that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we chop off the top part of that grass. Yep. Now we got rid of all our grass. We had sod webworm or something.
Just trying to make it interesting.
Yeah. So when you chop off that top, what was the grass blade doing? It was making food for that grass, right? And so a lot of people think, well, I'm going to chop it really short because I don't want it to grow tall or grow as fast, right? Every time you chop the grass back, it starts growing again. And in order to grow, what does it need? Water and nutrition out of the ground, right? And so every time we mow the lawn, we're doing damage to that grass. So if you can mow higher, that's better. If you mow your lawn and it looks light yellow-green instead of the same color it was before you started cutting, that's a good sign that you're cutting way too much. Agriculture or lawn care specialists recommend not taking more than 1/3 of the blade off. So this year, I'm going to talk about how you should properly do it, and then we're going to talk about drought. This year, I would put your mower on the highest setting. And if the OCD can get through you and not be a problem, mow it every other week instead of every week. Because every time you're cutting that grass, you're stressing it. It needs to use more water and more food to grow back. So as far as mowing, the higher you can go, the better it is for your lawn. Okay, if you're mowing it really short, not only does it stress it out, but it also allows weeds to grow that need sunlight to germinate. It damages it to the point where bugs and grubs are more likely to attack your lawn than if you leave it longer and healthy. So does that make sense? Any questions on that? So, okay. Other things that you can do this time of year. So when I was in lawn care and mowing and taking care of people's yards, every spring I'd go out aerating, and people would ask me, why do you aerate? Is that just something that they invented so that you could make some more money? And I'm talking to them, and I'm looking at my clipboard thinking, I got to make a payment on my truck. Yeah, you need to aerate your yard. Now, this is not something that we invented to make us money while we're waiting for the lawn to grow. Aerating actually does three things. Number one, okay. Yeah, how far does this pull out? Okay, yeah, go ahead and erase all that. So, how? Okay. So we have our lawn and we come and pull out a plug. Okay. So we got all these grass. Here, I'll let you have this. We have this nice, beautiful lawn, and someone comes out with a aerator, and they punch a bunch of holes, and it leaves little dog poops all over the lawn, and everyone thinks it's ugly, right? So what aerating does is it thins out the lawn a little bit, and it allows water and air to get down into the root zone. When you fertilize, it also lets those fertilizer granules get down into the root zone. So if you walk on your lawn, or you have pets, or you have children that are running on the lawn, it's compacted. And so that's one reason why we aerate it, is to loosen that compaction. So aerating lets you get water, air, and fertilizer down into the root zone. So I have a lot of people say, well, I aerated and I didn't notice anything different, so why do it? I challenge you to aerate half your yard and then fertilize and water like you normally would, and see which half of your lawn does better. And I've never had anyone come back and tell me that the non-aerated side did just as well or better than the aerated side. I used to do lawn care, and I had this one house that was 12 feet from the sidewalk to the neighbor's house. And so their property was 6 feet. If you've ever spread fertilizer, you know it doesn't just go 6 feet. It goes, it covered the whole 12 feet. But I only aerated her 6 feet. And her lawn was dark green, always grew better than the lawn that I didn't take care of. So I know that this works. This is the best thing that you can do. What about power raking? Has anyone ever power raked? I always see people asking on Facebook, who power rakes? And so aerating is meant for our types of grass, cool season grass, bluegrass, ryegrass. Power raking is more for the grass we don't like, the Bermuda grass. And I'm not saying go out and do it if you have lots of Bermuda. If you're trying to get a bluegrass, you want to have your bluegrass healthy. So the stuff that the power rake's actually digging up is not the roots and stuff that you want. It's digging up old dry grass that you could have eliminated if you cut short in the fall. So any questions on aerating versus power raking? Or
Our son told us that our the water line
Mhm.
really close to the surface, and they said that there's a chemical stuff that they can spray on, and that works just as good as aerating.
So I haven't used it. I've seen things on, and for those of you watching, if you didn't hear, she was asking about chemical aeration. So I know there's a lot of things out there, so you could try it out and see if it works. I've never used that myself. If you want to be a guinea pig and try it out, aerate half and do that on half and see if it works. And I don't know what the cost is on that.
Tim, I've priced around to have people do it for me, and most of the companies now are actually doing the liquid.
Okay.
Do the,
And I, again,
for the other.
yeah, I haven't used, did you try it?
Before I did the regular aerating, and I've had it on there for a couple of companies, and so I guess I have tried it. But I've been overly impressed.
And you say you're not impressed? Okay, so we have one that has used it and says he's not as impressed as the, not as impressed as the core aerating. So I haven't seen it. I've just seen videos on Facebook, and a lot of the stuff on Facebook I don't really trust as much. I tell people, if you want good, reliable information, if it says .edu after it, it's probably good. If it says facebook.com, it's probably questionable. So, okay? Yeah.
I aerated and I power raked later on because I thought I'd get rid of some of the dead grass. Is that okay?
Well, so the problem with power raking is our roots aren't the rhizomes like the Bermuda grass is that rhizome type grass. And so it's nice to chop those up if you have a Bermuda grass lawn. The bluegrass lawns, when you do that, you do more damage to the grass. And so instead of having nice healthy blades, you're eliminating a good percentage of your good grass. So that's why we don't recommend it. What I do is in the fall when I'm in October when they've shut the water off and your lawn starts going dormant, I'll drop my mower a notch one week and then I'll drop it another notch the next week. And if you mow really short in the fall, because the grass isn't growing anymore, it's going dormant, so now you're not stressing it out, then in the spring you usually don't have that buildup of old dry stuff. I've seen some lawns that have sat over winter and hadn't been mowed, and it's a bugger to mow those in the spring if they have not been properly put to sleep. You almost have to power rake it just to get your lawnmower to go through there. So.
I was wondering, if you make these plugs, doesn't that open it up for weed seeds to come in and space for them? If
Yeah.
the grass is healthy and solid, then the weeds can't come in as easily.
Okay, so that's a good question because drowning out weeds is one thing that we try to do with our lawns and with ground cover plants. So the question was, does that open up a chance for weeds? So a lot of your weeds need sunlight to germinate. And so if they're falling in a hole that's buried by those tall grasses, they're not going to germinate. So that is one way to keep the weeds down. There's other ways. There's chemical ways where you put a pre-emergent. If you've used step 1 fertilizer, that's a pre-emergent, and that keeps weeds from germinating. And you can either buy pre-emergent on its own or you can buy it in a fertilizer. I don't recommend the 4-step program. I'd tell people use what you need and use, if you need step 1 4 times a year, that's better than having weeds. Especially if you have secondary water, you have weed seeds coming through the water all the time. And even if you don't aerate, you're still going to have those weeds popping up on a non-aerated lawn. We're going to talk about aerating a little bit later and why it's important. But for those of you who want to know, is it worth aerating or power raking? My experience is power raking is not that good. When I was a kid, my mom bought a dethatcher. I'd go out and do the whole lawn. It really beats up your lawn, and it doesn't do as good as if you aerate and overseed with new grass seed. Okay? All right. Let's talk about types of irrigation. So go ahead and erase that one. Yeah. Oh, bagging and mulching. So what happens when you bag is you're hauling off that nutrition. But if you mulch your lawn, you're returning a lot of that nutrition back. And you'll find that you fertilize a lot less because you're giving some of that nutrition back. And I like to mow when my lawn is dry, so I don't like to mow right after I watered the night before or the day before or the day of. And so I chop it up and it just kind of feathers into the lawn. So that's my preference. If you choose to bag it, I have a lot of people that tell me the pets drag it in or my kids bring in grass clippings. So if you choose to bag it, it just means you're going to need to fertilize a little bit more. But like I said, if you mow a little higher, you have less waste than if you're mowing really short. So, yeah.
What if your lawnmower doesn't have a mulcher on it? You just
So does it have a side discharge or? Okay.
back where the bag is.
Yeah. If it has a bag and you take it off and it flips in, that's an automatic mulcher. And some have a side discharge, some say 3-in-1, and you can change all these different things. But most mowers now are either bag or mulch. You can choose whichever you want. So, yeah. If you're a mulcher, like I have a nice Honda machine and it has a mulching blade that you can buy, and it chops it up 4 times. That's how they sell it. It's chopping up 4 times because you have your front wheels lifted. So the 2 blades spinning has 4. I mean, it's a lot of technology. But with my government stimulus check last year, I bought a nice riding mower. And so it shoots it out. And my first time I cut, I was like, oh, I don't want have this sprayed all over. But after mowing several times, I don't even see the side spray. It just disappears.
Do you have to wait till the temperatures are warmer during the day to mulch so it
Well,
poses better? Or
not necessarily, but that goes back to watering just before you cut. So last year when we were on 2-day-a-week waterings, and so if you watered one day, that meant you had like 2 days in between and 3 days in between. So I would mow on the third day in between and then water the next day, because I like it dry. So when I mow it, and so it doesn't matter what the temperature is. But how many of you mowed a lawn right after it's been watered? Whether you're bagging or not. If you're bagging, it's a miserable mess because it clogs the chute. And if you're mulching, it's still a mess. But it's just, I like to let my lawn dry out, mow it, and then water it the next day. Okay. Any other questions on mowing? Okay. So 3 types of irrigation. So we've got flooding. If you want to write those down. Sorry. So flooding, drip, and then spray and impact heads. So drip is one, and then spray and impact. Okay, so those of us that have sprinkler systems, we're living the lap of luxury, right? You just turn it on and you don't have to worry about it. When I was a kid, I grew up in the country and we had flood irrigation. And my little brother and I, we didn't keep track of time. It's weird when you're a kid, like Christmas came every 4 years for me because it just seemed like forever. Christmas was less often than the Olympics, it seemed like. But my little brother and I, in the summertime when school's out, we loved it when my dad flood irrigated. And we didn't even think about, hey, it's Friday. It's irrigation time. We get to go out and play in the water. For some reason, that never really dawned on me. But those of you anyone here flood irrigate still? No? Okay, some of you have shares, and I love it. That's the best way to water your lawn and your garden. How often do you water? Once every 7 days? So you don't have to worry about the water restrictions, right? Other than you may have been cut back some, okay? But flood irrigation, the reason it's the best is it gets a deep soaking, okay? And when I was a kid, we watered our lawn once a week, and that was it. Some of the pioneers, when they had water shares, it was every 6.5 days. And if you do the math, that means that your water share is on a different half day the next week and a different half day. And so sometimes your water share fell on Sundays. And some of those pioneers, they were devout Christians. They weren't going to water on the Sabbath, and so they skipped a day. So they went 13 days sometimes without water. So it is possible to water and take care of your lawns with less water. Now, again, we're going to talk about how you should properly do it, and then we're going to talk about drought restrictions and what you can do this year. Okay, so if you can't flood, if you have trees and shrubs, the next best thing would be drip irrigation. And this is where customers come in and they frustrate me because they tell me, oh, I have a nice sprinkler system, but my plants are dying. And I ask them, well, what do you have? And they say, well, I have all my shrubs are on a drip system. And I ask them, well, how long are you watering it? And they say, oh, just 25 minutes. And how many of you have used a drip system? Is that good or bad? 25 minutes, is that good or bad? It's bad, right? Because the purpose of a drip system is just to let a little bit of water out. Your spray and impact heads are letting out gallons per minute, and your drips are letting out gallons per hour. So let's say that you have a 1 gallon per hour drip and you're only doing 25 minutes. You're getting less than half a gallon to that shrub, and that's probably not enough water. And so if you're going to use a sprinkler system, you need to know how to use it and use it properly, okay?
May I suggest that drip system is really nice because it gets the water exactly where it's needed instead of all over everywhere feeding the weeds also. So it's just
Yeah.
time turned up to give it sufficient amount.
Right. So if you're going to use a drip, if you didn't hear what Eric said, you need to run it longer. It's meant to run for an hour or 2 hours at a time and not every day. We're talking, yeah. Yeah, so depending on your drip system. So what I recommend, if you're planting trees, I put those on a 10 gallon per hour nozzle. If I'm planting shrubs, I put them on a 3 or 4 gallon per hour. If I'm doing perennials, 1 gallon per hour. That way I'm not overwatering my perennials to get enough water on my trees or underwatering my trees to get enough water on my perennials. Does that make sense? So like trees, I do 10 GPH. Shrubs, I do 3 or 4. And perennials, I do 1 gallons per hour. So you can buy different inserts for that drip system. Okay? Just 1 now this is if you have mixed, if you have shrubs, trees, and perennials on the same zone. If you just have perennials, you could put 10 and run it for 10 minutes because that's going to put out a lot of water on those perennials. But like Eric said, now you're not wasting water on the rest of the bed. You have less weeds because you're not just broadcasting water everywhere. And with drip systems running for 2 or 3 hours, you're going to use less water than if you were spraying that for 20 or 30 minutes because you're not doing so many gallons per minute in the same section. Okay? All right, sprays and impacts. So spray heads, I see lots of misconceptions on Facebook. So spray heads are the little pop-ups that go psh, and they spray, right? Impact or rotor heads. So the spray ones are the ones that they're saying you only get 20 minutes, okay? The reason because they're in a smaller area and a full spray head, a 15-foot full spray head puts out about 4 gallons per minute. A rotor, a 30-foot full circle usually puts out about 4 gallons per minute, but it's covering twice the area. That's why if you have gear drive or rotors, they say 40 minutes. If you have spray, you only get 20 minutes, okay? So when you're setting your clock, now in good conditions, it's important to know how this works, and we'll talk about how to water in a little bit. But okay, any questions on the types of irrigation? Okay, the other is just hand watering with a hose, and that's okay. Just make sure that you're watering deep enough, and I'll talk about how to check your water here in a little bit too. Okay, so how to water properly. So time of day is really important. We're asked not to water between the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. because it's hot and a lot of that water in the air evaporates, okay? And so that's why it's important not to water in the middle of the day. I know the cities sometimes water during the day. There's a reason for that. It's so that you have pressure to water. If everyone turned their sprinklers on at the same time, we don't have enough pressure to operate. So everyone can blame the city, right? Jensen? But they aren't doing it because they're irresponsible. They're doing it really to help you. I am proud of West Haven City. The parks looked like crap last year because they were doing their part. And I go to Ogden and I watch them watering 2 or 3 times, 3 or 4 times a week. And it's just sad, but our city did a good job of taking care of it. There are some things I think they can improve, like aerating, and we're going to talk about that, why you should aerate a little more. Okay. And then how long? Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of that. All right. Let's do a visual here. Eric, come up here and hold your hands like a University of is this Miami? Who is the Hurricanes? I don't know. Okay, put your hands up here. Okay, yeah. Okay, so Eric has a beaker of sand. It's full of sand all the way to the top. And I've got a gallon of water, and I pour it all at one time. What happens to most of that water? It goes all over, right? Okay, so this is why we don't recommend watering for 20 or 30 or 40 minutes at one time. If I take that gallon and I pour a little bit, and then I let it soak, and I pour a little bit, and I let it soak, and pour a little bit more. Now where is that water going? It's going deep into that sand, right? Okay, thank you, Eric. So, so the way that we do this, so this is where my CLIA experience comes in. So, the best way to water your lawn, if you're doing spray heads, from about 10 to 12 minutes, the lawn starts to get saturated. If it's clay, after 10 minutes, it's saturated. On sand, after 15, it's saturated. So if you set your spray heads for about 10 minutes, And then, so if sprays are half as much as our gear drive or rotors, so how long should we set our gear drives in? 20 minutes, right? Okay. So we're going to water for 20 minutes on our gear drive heads, and we're going to run through all the cycles, and then we're going to come back and run again. So now we're getting our 40 minutes, but we're doing it twice. This is going to get a deeper penetration than if you just do it all 40 minutes at one time. If you have any kind of a slope and you're running for 40 minutes, where's your grass the wettest, the greenest? Down at the bottom, right? And where's it driest? Up at the top, because all that water keeps rolling down. Now, this is where aerating becomes important. So for drought situations, how many of you aerate your yard every year? Okay. Anyone aerate more than once a year? Anyone aerate more than twice a year? 3 times, 4 times? Okay. So you really should aerate every time you fertilize. But I know no one wants to look at those ugly dog poops, and so they don't aerate. So I'm lucky to get you to do it once a year. This year, I would encourage you to do it once a month, or if you stop seeing those holes, aerate. So, because now, let's say we have a slight slope here. And so we're watering for 20 minutes, and so we're getting a little bit of penetration of water down here. So 2 days ago, we had a light rainstorm, and I was excited because I saw the forecast. It was saying almost 1/4 inch. That's quite a bit of rain. But the next morning when I ran out and I looked in my freshly tilled area, the rain was maybe 1/8 inch in the soil. So it did not penetrate the soil and this is sandy soil. So I was very disappointed in our weathermen. They let me down. Okay. So we're. Because I keep touching. Yeah. Okay. I'm learning this. Yeah. Okay. So let's say that we chop some holes in here with our aerator. Okay, so now, instead of that water running down the slope, we've opened up a bunch of funnels in there. And so instead of running down the slope or setting on top and just barely breaking the crust, we're getting more water down in. This is why aerating is more important this year or last year than it's ever been. So these pictures are not to scale or graphically correct. So, okay. So this is why I really encourage you to aerate your yards more than once this year, as often as you can. If you can afford it, hire someone, or if you want to do it yourself, I rent them. Advantage Pond and Rental rents an aerator. Again, I'm not here promoting this to make money. I want you to have healthy lawns. We're not going to have green, lush lawns this year, but if you do this, you're going to have a better looking lawn than someone that never aerates their yard. Okay? Any questions on aerating or water times?
You can adjust your clock depending on the type so that it can water more than once per zone.
Right.
I hope that water soaks instead of giving it 20 or 40 minutes all at one time where it's more likely to run off.
Yeah, and so your clock, most clocks have a program A, program B, program C. And in that program A, they might have 3 or 4 start times, right? And so this is where, and I've had people tell me, well, I have to water 24 hours a day just to cover all my sprinkler zones. Well, put your front yard on program A and do it this way. Break up however many zones you have and run half the time and then start it again. And then do on another, now this goes against Weber Basin if they're saying you can only water on one day. You're going to have to fight with them. Or water your front yard on the day that they tell you can and water your back day on another day. Now, this is only if you can't do it all in one evening, one night, okay? And then I do my drips on program C, so I can run them some other time and they're not getting an hour 3 times because I'm watering everything else. Does that make sense? Okay? So that's the beauty of those clocks is you have program A that you can set certain things for, and program B you can do others, and program C for others. Some clocks, I think Rainbird makes a 4-program clock too. So that's what it's meant for, is so that you can be smart. So I'm not here to talk about water-wise plants. I'm here to make wise waterers out of you. So, okay?
I mean, I know some people don't like having those plugs from aerating and they sometimes rake them up. Of course, doing it monthly, you'll lose all your topsoil if you do that. But is there any benefit or, I mean, outside of just that?
So you really shouldn't rake up those plugs, but if you do rake them up, you are taking away some of your soil. But that's okay, because if you actually look at your lawn, your lawn builds up because wind blows dust and sand back into it. So if you haul them off because you don't like the looks, you can. I prefer to just, I just hit them with my mower and chop them up. Yeah.
Fertilization, you know as well as I do that, these lawns are gonna dry up really bad.
Yeah.
One day a week is not gonna water my lawn. So fertilization won't burn your lawn if you're, putting a lot of fertilizer.
It will. And so this is, let's finish talking about watering, and then we're going to talk about what we should do now in the drought. Okay. Okay. Before you do anything, when your water comes on, the best thing to do is go out and turn on your sprinklers and run through each zone and do what we call an audit. Okay. You're going to look for broken heads. You're going to look for heads that are bent one way, and you're going to make sure that everything's covering what it's supposed to. If we're on secondary water, we get dirty water. And if you're the first one to turn it on, you get weeds and junk and muck. And somebody posted on Facebook the other day, they got fish through their filters. Okay. So I'm kind of glad we're not the first ones to get the water, because Roy City's getting all that gunk right now. So hopefully it's cleaned out by the time we get the water. But what you should do is go through and make sure all your valves and all your zones are working properly. How many of you driven by and you see someone watering their lawn and they have a broken head and it's Old Faithful, or it's just running down the sidewalk into the gutter? Okay, that doesn't do anyone any good. And no matter how much you water the sidewalk, it's not growing any taller. So what you need to do is do an audit. And so on the list of hints, I've talked about auditing. And thanks for the people from Revive. You guys that are here get some of these cups. So, sure. I think I could probably give 4 per family here, 4 per group. So you can buy nice cups like this, or you can go eat a lot of tuna fish and put tuna cans out. What you want to do is space these out in between your heads, run a cycle, and then check each one and see how much water's landing in there. If they're not even, then you need to think about redoing your sprinkler system, having someone come in and professionally do it, or doing it yourself if you're up to that. Okay? These are from the fine makers of Revive products. I don't know how much they cost. He just sent them to me when I told him I was doing a class. So what you'll do is, you'll pick a sprinkler zone, and like if you have a dry spot and you want to see which head is not hitting what's supposed to, you can put them out here. Now, one bad thing about when you're doing an audit is it doesn't take into account wind. So if wind is blowing, that's going to change your whole sprinkler system. So it could be the perfect system, but wind can really mess up. So that's unfortunately, when we're asleep, we don't know when it's going to blow. And so, do we have enough? Okay. Do we have extras that I can take back? Okay. All right. Do you want some of these? Okay. So these have a little measuring gauge, but you don't have to necessarily measure how much water's there. It's just mainly seeing that you have even coverage in that section that you're auditing, okay? And then, like I said, if you want to get tuna cans and just stick them all over your lawn, your neighbors are going to look at you like, what are they doing out there? But it's a good way to check how much water you're getting out there. Okay? Okay, one other thing. So I talked about breaking up your watering instead of doing 40 minutes at once, doing 20 and 20. So I have customers come in and say, well, I do 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes at night every day. And so if we do 4 times a week, 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at the day, who thinks that's a good idea? Okay. Why is that a bad idea? So in 5 minutes, exactly. And so these people are like, oh, I do it every day, 5 minutes, and my lawn looks really great. What happens is when it gets hot, their lawn doesn't look really great, or they shut the water off and their lawn doesn't look great. So in 5 minutes, you're getting a little bit of water here, but during the day, the wind's blowing, the sun's baking it, and so it evaporates. So even though it might be the same amount of water, we're not getting water down in the root zone. And so that's why it's better to do do it for 20 minutes, let it soak in, and then an hour or two later, when you've run through all the zones, do it again. It's just like having 2 short rainstorms instead of 1 small rainstorm every 12 hours.
And I understand it encourages the roots of the grass to grow deeper.
Yeah.
So it's stronger instead of shallow.
Right. So yeah, if I'm doing 5 minutes every day, shallow roots, the problem when it gets hot, they wilt and they don't do as well. So then, this is another issue when people come and buy trees and shrubs and they have a nice sprinkler system and they're watering their grass like they should, but their trees die. And they always ask me, well, I don't understand. It's getting watered by the sprinklers. Well, how deep are you watering the grass? If you're doing it right, maybe 2 or 3 inches. Now this year we're not going to, because in 40 minutes you're not going to water enough. But tree roots, how deep is that new tree that you just planted? A foot or foot and a half, 2 feet deep. And so if we're relying on the sprinklers on our new trees and shrubs, that's not going to cut it. So I always recommend hand watering. Even if you have a drip system, you need to go out there and make sure that those trees and shrubs are getting water. Okay? How do you know if it's getting deep enough? So I went to, a lady called me and she said, I have this beautiful garden and I come and look at your garden and your garden looks really good, but mine it dries out and I use the hose and I water it every day and it just dries out. It looks like it's dry, but the ground is wet, but it looks dry. So I went to her house and she had just watered and I asked for a shovel. And I took the shovel, and just like the other day when we got the rain, I put that shovel down and the water was just this deep. So I asked her, how do you water? And she said, well, I take my hose and I just go over each plant just like this. And that's what she was doing. And I said, well, how often do you do that? Just once? And she says, yeah. And so I showed her that water's not going down. So what you need to do, if you're going to hand water, because it might be more efficient than sprinkler water because you're not spraying everything. You need to water that, hit all your other plants, come back and hit that, come back and hit that. It's the same thing as watering for 15 minutes and letting it soak, and 15 minutes more letting it soak. Does that make sense? So you can check and see how deep your water is getting. If you run your drip for an hour and you go out and you dig and it's only 3 inches deep and your shrubs are a foot down, then you maybe need to kick it up to an hour and a half or 2 hours. But that's the only way you can really know how much water you're getting to those plants. People ask me, how long should I water or how much water should I get it? Well, the correct answer is as often as it needs it and as much as it needs. There's no magic formula. You have to get your hands dirty and go out there and fill it. So, any questions on that?
So, moisture meter is another nice way of doing it because it measures the amount of water under the surface, puncturing down with.
So Eric's talking about a moisture meter, and if you don't want to dig up because you've laid rock and all that stuff, it is hard to do that. So the moisture meter, you shove down into the soil and it'll tell you if it's wet or dry. And depending on how deep you push it down, if you push it down and it says dry, you know that it needs some more water down there, right?
So what time of day do you recommend watering? I always thought first thing in the morning so that it can soak in before the sun.
Okay, so Eric asked, if you didn't hear, what time of day should you water? He was saying in this morning so that the sun can dry it out, right? Is what you said?
So it can soak in before.
Oh, in the morning, so it soaks in before the sun dries it out. Yes. So I don't recommend the evening in the springtime. So 6 o'clock watering is not good when it's cool because we have fungus issues. In the summertime when our nights are 70 degrees, between 6 and 10, it really doesn't matter what time. The fungus isn't going to happen because it's going to evaporate. But what Eric's suggesting is true. You want to water before the sun comes out and evaporates what's sitting on top. So if you can water before 10, like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, if you're nice and courteous like me, I try to set my front sidewalk first, like at 4 or 3 in the morning, so that if there's joggers or walkers at 5 and 6, I'm not spraying them with my sprinklers. Other discourteous people, they don't care. It's running at 6 o'clock and people are running out in the street to get around so they aren't getting wet. So, right?
I think the other half of the answer is water when nobody else is watering.
Well, and that's, you can't know what everyone else, but you can see who's watering at different times. If you turn your sprinklers on and you can push it down, you don't have the pressure to run it. And maybe during the day you do because you actually have the pressure that's designed right. But if that's the case, there's 2 ways you can get a pump and suck it out, or try to pick another day that not as many people are watering. We're lucky out here. We have really great pressure. Water flows down. And so everyone up on the benches, most of them have pumps to suck the water out of the system because they don't have enough pressure to run it without it. So, okay. But as far as like drips, you could run your drips during the day because it's not spraying out into the yard. So that's, if you want to set your drips on program C and water it during the day, that's fine. Yes.
I just have a question about your saying, that you could set it, for pick a day or whatever. I thought we were designated to Tuesdays here in West Haven.
So that's something that I'm telling you how you should water. Then we're going to talk about drought restrictions and what you're going to have to do. Now, I rent my house, and so I don't get the newsletter from Weber Basin. And so I was under the impression it's under your address number. And so everyone should not be watering on the same day on the same street because we all have different address numbers. Does that make sense? All right. So, yes.
And also, if you've got a meter, then you can go on and look, and it said that the ones with meters, I believe it said that we could pick a day and water on that day.
Okay. If you have a meter.
Have it allotted.
Yeah. Do you have a meter on yours? Okay. So again, I don't get the newsletters. I just get the feedback from the customers. I do have a short well, but it doesn't run as long as I'd like it to. So I have to use secondary water too. Okay. Any questions on time of watering? Okay. Before we get into drought, I want to talk about 3 things. So let's erase that. Last year, a lot of people thought because they were only watering twice a week that they were having, their lawns were dying because of not enough water. And last year was really bad for grubs, sod webworm, all sorts of bugs. And so I want to talk about identifying different pests. So let's write drought and fungus. Let's call it problems. Yeah. So P. Oh. This is a cool tool. I need to get one of these for the nursery. Okay, so problems. So the first one is fungus, bugs, or water. So, the first 3, the 3. Okay, how do you know if it's a fungus? So people always ask me, I have this spot in my yard, and I don't know if it's grubs or water. So fungus, bugs, or water. Eric, did you ever encounter fungus issues? Sure. What would it look like?
Well, mushrooms for one thing.
Okay. So people come in and say, I've got mushrooms growing in my lawn, and they're white and black, right? And you kick them and your shoes are black. I got nice new shoes. If I kick them, they'll be black. So mushrooms are a sign of a fungus. Mold. If you pile your snow in one spot, sometimes you get what we call snow mold. And it's because it stays really wet as the grass is warming up. Everything else is melting off, but this snow keeps it here, and so we get a snow mold building up. There's other fungus issues. Usually a fungus will be like in a circle, and it doesn't grow. Sometimes it looks like Mickey Mouse, but it stays in the same spot. It doesn't grow like a bug problem, okay? All right, and so you can use a fungicide to treat that. What if it's bugs? Has anyone seen a brown spot in your lawn and it grows? No matter how much you water, it keeps growing, okay? And there might be green patches left in it. This is a sign of a bug problem, okay? So bugs are not going to eat in a round shape. It might be irregular shaped, and like I said, you might have a patch of green grass here and there that they've missed. And so if you're going to control that, you really need to be controlling that here in the green spot, because they've already moved on from here. If you put bug killer in here, you're not treating it right. So you need to treat the rest of your yard if it's bugs. If it's a water issue, how can you tell if it's water? What's that?
I said it's all
Um,
over, y'all yellow.
okay. What if it's just a plugged head? Because a lot of times people think it's bugs, and so they come and buy bug protection, but it's really just a bad head, right? So I have a nice lawn, and for some reason I have a dry patch right here, and everything else is green. That's probably not a bug problem. That's more likely a sprinkler problem, and it's not growing. It stays the same. It might even be a erase that. How do you erase the whole thing? Okay, so I have a sprinkler head here, and here, but I didn't like it. These are closer and this is not. And so my arc is coming like this. Let's see, that's that one. This one's coming like this. This one's coming like. When I was in college, I used to do this with compass all the time. Anyway, so I'd have this kind of dead diamond in the middle because my heads were stretched out too far. So shapes are a good sign that it's a water issue and not a bug or a fungus issue, except for the round Mickey Mouse ears. That's usually a fungus issue, okay? You can go ahead and erase, you can erase all that, but the problem's just so.
How big is that circle of the fungus?
For the fungus, it can be it just depends on, so fungus grows a lot slower than if it's a bug problem and you're watering, they'll just move to greener pastures. They love it. They just chew on those roots. Every lawn has some grubs in it, but it's when they get lots of grubs that they do that damage. And so if you want to prevent it, you can put some down, like in late May, June, you can put some imidacloprid to kill any bugs or grubs down there. Some people are afraid of using chemicals, so they don't do that. But last year in my yard, I thought the same thing. Oh man, my lawn's dying because the sprinklers aren't hitting it. And then I'm looking at it, I'm like, no, this is bugs. And as soon as I treated it, it greened right back up. It started growing back the grass. So, okay. Any questions on water problems or grass problems? Yeah. Yeah, and now cinch bugs can come out in March or early April. And so again, you really need to know what you're treating and not just take pictures. That helps us at the nursery. But a lot of times people think it's just a water issue and they water more and it gets worse. And that's why, because they're treating the wrong thing. Okay. So if you go to the handout, we can run through this really quick. Nutrition and plants. So we talked about the purpose of life, right? So aerating is one of the best things that you can do this year because of the drought. Aerating is going to get more of that water down there. You asked about fertilizing. Weber Conservatory just did a watering in drought times, and they were saying only fertilize 2 or 3 times a year. So if you know it's going to rain, go ahead and give it some fertilizer, but maybe you give it half the amount that you normally would, because fertilizer does encourage root growth and all that. And if it doesn't have the water to support it, that can be bad on the lawn, and so that can do some damage. Doesn't necessarily burn it, it isn't doing what it's supposed to, and so it's better off to under-fertilize than to over-fertilize this year. Okay? But aerating is going to help your fertilizer, help your water get down in there. You can also use surfactant type things like Revive. So this company makes a fertilizer. It's not necessarily a fertilizer. It's 511, but they don't call it fertilizer. They call it soil amendment. What it does is help pull water into the soil. And so if you've aerated and used this, it helps you quite a bit fight the stress. You can also use humic acid or what's the other one? Gypsum helps with water retention.
I have an area on the lawn in the horse pasture where the alkali is making a real penetration into the lawn and pulling it out.
So the alkali, the alkali is just because we don't have enough water, the salt stays there. And so adding some sulfur or gypsum helps a lot with that alkali. Okay, and that might be what that liquid aerating is they might be using a gypsum product or a humic acid product, and so it's helping suck water in without creating the holes that aerating does. I don't know for sure because I don't use that. So okay, proper watering. So we talked about 10 minutes or 20 minutes with a spray head, right? And so if you break up your watering times, so if you're 40 minutes on a gear drive or an impact, I would do that 20 minutes twice within the, that watering day within a few hours. So don't do it 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. That's not good. So, okay. That's what they're saying. So 40 minutes per impact zone. So let's say you have 6 zones and 3 of them are impact and 3 are spray. So you're supposed to water 120 minutes with the impacts and 60 minutes with the sprays, which would be, who's our math? It's 3 hours, right? Right? Okay. So we're still watering 3 hours, but we're breaking it up into 20 minutes and 10 instead of 40 and 20, if that makes sense. Okay? But that's going to get a deeper penetration of water down into that root zone than the other. You can go ahead and erase problems and stuff. So. It's nice having a scribe. All right. So that proper watering kind of talks about how you should break up your watering stuff. Okay, so back to mowing. So mow as high as you can, mow less often. If you can get away with just doing it every other week. If you drive by the nursery, I hate it. I've got dandelions up, but I don't want to water that, or I don't want to mow that until they turn the water on. And I'm not going to mow it short. I like a nice short mowed lawn. I bought this government stimulus package mower that I don't have to push anymore. I can ride it, and it takes me half an hour to do my acre lawn. But this year, it's not gonna be pretty. So okay, so mow as high as you can and mow as less often as you can stand it. Okay, if you're gonna have a party or something, then back to maybe you water your backyard twice and don't do your front yard, and you mow it nice for that party. But we all have to follow the same guidelines. I know there's gonna be some people out there that don't, but just pray for more rain, and luckily we've been really good this year to get extra rain this spring. Okay. So again, the grass blade, that's what's feeding it. So every time you cut it, it's got to regenerate, and so it's going to take more. So fertilizing. So again, I would cut back on your fertilizer, but I would still fertilize 3 or 4 times a year. I'd just use less than what you normally would. So if your setting said 10 on your spreader, then cut it back to 5. And a healthy lawn's going to do better than a stressed lawn. But if it's over fertilized and it's trying to grow more, then you just don't have the water to do it. Any questions on that? Okay, next page. We talked about auditing. Any questions on auditing? I know on Facebook some people have posted, I need help fixing my sprinklers. And so there are some people, just make sure they know what they're doing. If they're not necessarily licensed contractors, but make sure they know what they're doing if they're going to work on your sprinkler system. And if you have any questions, that's what I'm here for. You can always call me or come to the nursery and talk to me, and I'll give you some tips and ideas. But last summer, I went through my whole system and lifted up heads. Heads were pointing backwards. I had some heads that were a couple feet in, and I re-spaced everything so that it was hitting head to head. So does everyone know what that means? Head-to-head coverage? So if I'm a sprinkler and Emily's a sprinkler, my water should be hitting her feet and her water should be hitting my feet. And if we're too far apart and you're not hitting head to head, then you need to put another head in there. That's where you get those water patterns. Okay. And then I talked about you can take a shovel and dig down, see how deep your water's going, or you can use a soil meter. And we talked about the turf problems. Okay. So with the drought, again, some of you have heard about Flip the Strip, right? And none of our city council members are here, but Weber Basin has a program. If you flip the strip, that they can give you money, but your city has to be on board. So talk to your city council. Say, we need to get Flip the Strip on our thing. What do they, Matt, what is that?
So,
What do they have to do what does the city have to do for Weber Basin to be able to do that?
so to qualify for Flip the Strip, the city has to pass a landscaping ordinance that restricts landscaping on new residential installations and for commercial developments. What this does is reduce, it more or less says no turf in your park strip for new residential, and limits the amount of turf lawn that can be put in the front and side yards. It still allows the backyards to go through. Residential or for commercial, it limits and discourages lawn from being put in like parking strips in the parking areas. So just to give you an update, we're taking this to Planning Commission. They'll be talking about it a little bit in the work session tomorrow, and then they'll be reviewing it and getting it to the council over the next month or so. And so we are interested in it. Weber Basin, when we first looked at it, they said they had a limit of 35% total in the lawn for anybody's new residential yards. And we thought that was a bit restrictive. And so they've pulled back a little bit on that, and we're looking to listen and review the ordinance and put that into place. So we know we've received a bunch of calls on Flip the Strip. It's going to be just a little bit more on that, but the city is pursuing that at this time. So.
Seems like you're suggesting that just new construction.
The city has to.
So the city's ordinance limits it so for any new development. A property owner, once they have stuff in, it becomes a government taking if we come and say, you got to rip out your lawn. But when we pass the ordinance for the new residential and new commercial, then it allows you to be incentivized through Flip the Strip to come in and remove your strips and get paid to cover part of that rehabilitation and drought resistance settings. So one of the things we're looking at, some people have said, hey, I'm not going to water my park strip. It's going to die, but the program says it has to be alive. Well, they understand if you're trying to help with the drought this year, they're not going to penalize you that.
Plant some flowers just before you take a picture.
They're just thinking if you've just got a patch of dirt there, they're not going to pay you to make it pretty with gravel. They want to make sure that you're replacing existing sod with more drought resistant. I had a question here, and then we'll come up here.
My understanding is it's been going on for almost a year now, to me, you could write a new ordinance in a half hour, and it's taken them 7 months so far, and it's still not done. So that's question, or problem number one. Number two, you mentioned you have to write this ordinance for new development. What about those of us that are already there? Can it be grandfathered in? We can move on it now? We can't because the city hasn't approved it.
Yeah, so the city has to approve it. That qualifies Weber Basin to suddenly say West Haven's on board, and then they can move forward. You have to fill out a little application, take pictures, submit what you're doing and that, and they have some requirements on that. So unfortunately, I don't want to say flip your strip yet, but I don't want to make you miss out on possible reimbursement on some of those. And again, like I said, when the Flip the Strip program came out, if you'll notice, a lot of the early adopters were cities that were largely built out. So they're like, we only got 10 acres of developable thing. Yeah, we'll pass this ordinance. It really didn't have an impact. And while there's different feelings of growth in this community, we didn't want to say, okay, we've got a whole subdivision coming in, and guess what? You can only have 35% of your total yard being grass. And now that they've switched it just to the front and side yard, then that's a little more palatable, and we want to get on board. So we have to weigh the interests of the new and the old, and I think we've got a point where the council's very interested in pursuing it at this point. So was it that answer there? So there aren't any council members here, but I know a couple of them are traveling, but we are recording this, and they'll be watching and make sure I've said the right things. So.
So what happens if you're in a neighborhood that we don't have a strip? So for instance, last year, I came up with the strip, and so I tore up brand new sod and did a little bit of xeriscaping. And so I was here on the presentation, and the mayor at that time said, yeah, we haven't come here, but we're not interested in putting the strip. So that was really disappointing. So I had to pay money for new construction, and then I had to pay money again
To pull it out.
to pull it out with no benefit, but we don't have strips.
Yeah.
So is it going to apply to people like me that didn't have a park strip?
Yeah.
But still ripped out?
Right now, it specifically targets the parking strips because the parking strips are the most difficult to water correctly without wasting a lot of water going onto the street and the sidewalks and the driveways. And so the program right now, the reimbursement's coming from Weber Basin, so that's a requirement from them. And so they're the ones who front the money on that. So we'd have to look at what they're doing.
Yeah, my yard goes right to the road.
Yeah.
So it is like a strip because the road's right there. But anyway, I'm just
Yeah, we'd have to look at it specifically. So I had a question in the back and then come right here. Okay. Ah.
Not my strip, my whole yard.
Well, good. Keep that strip, you know.
I
Strip's already done.
Yeah, but he used for hunting trees.
so some of my experience as a lawn care person, I hate doing lawns that have a tree and they've got grass and you're playing slalom with the trees and mowing it. It's really a pain. Do you know why we have park strips? For snow, okay? So when the plow's now in front of my nursery, because I have a turn lane, I don't have a strip. And so I go out there like a good citizen and clean off my sidewalk, and then the state comes and plows slush on my sidewalk, and it's heavy stuff that I can't get my snowblower to push off. So, but that's why we have park strips. Your kids, your grandkids, they're not playing soccer on the 4-foot wide park strip. And so I don't know why people put grass other than it's cheap compared to shrubs and trees. But xeriscaping your front park strip can look nice if you do it right. And doing your whole yard, I'd say flip the whole front yard. Now, you're not getting reimbursed from Weber Basin if you do the whole yard, but you don't spend a lot of time in your front yard. We used to be, back in the 20s and 30s, everyone sat on their front porch, and as people walked by, they'd wave and say, how you doing? And they would invite you in for lemonade or whatever. We were a front porch, front yard neighborhood. Now we're private. Everyone's in their backyards. And so why have grass out front? It's just something for you to mow, or if you live in an HOA, someone else to mow. But for your neighbor's dog to come and poop on your yard. So if you have kids or you have dogs and you need a place to run around in the backyard, then that's when I would encourage it. But if I was a business owner, I wouldn't put grass in my business because Now I got to hire someone to come and mow it. And I look at all these, like in Plain City, not Plain, Pleasant View, where over there where Kimberly Clark and Parker Hannafin and Brill, I drive by there going up to Weber, and I just see all these acres and acres of grass, and they're using culinary water. They don't have secondary. They're using culinary water to water all that green space that no one ever uses. No one goes out and plays football on that or kicks a soccer ball. It's all just someone's mowing. The only people that visit that is the lawnmower people. So
We had one question here, and then I'll get out of your way.
I heard that, to qualify for the Flip the Strip program through the Weaver Water Basin after the city okays it, you have certain requirements. It has to put in rock, you have to have drought tolerant plant, and you have to have a drip. If you don't have those, you don't qualify for the rebate. Is that wrong?
Yeah, there is a short class that you have to take, and there's certain parameters on that. I mean, I don't know if there's a full ratio of things you have to do, but if you do have plants in there, they want them on a drip system instead of a spray. They do want drought resistant. If you put mulch in they want it 3 inches deep, so it keeps the water and everything. So there are some specifications. It's not just as easy as, hey, I'm going to go pave my parking strip. And so we want to make sure it's attractive and still useful, and it actually gets the water back into the ground rather than just running off into the street and mixing with the oil and that kind of stuff, even though eventually it gets back to the lake. But, we want to be smart in that. And like it says, you want to be wise water and wise waterers is a huge thing. So, yeah. So thank you. And I'll come up afterwards as well.
if you're going to flip your strip and you had spray heads, then you're going to have to change your sprinkler system so that you have a drip and you're not using the spray heads on the grass with that drip system, because then you're going to underwater your strip, or you're going to overwater your lawn trying to water that strip, if that makes sense. So, yeah. So the reason people do grass is a lot cheaper than trees and shrubs, But in the long run, grass is going to cost you a lot more in maintenance and care. And so trees and shrubs are a lot cheaper to take care of than a lawn. So, but all right. Any other questions on what we can do this year? So anything that I didn't cover, watering with 40 minutes a week. I know it's going to be hard, but there are some things that you can do to make it better. And then, like I said at the beginning, you're in charge of that 40 minutes. So if you want a nicer backyard and you want to let your front yard go, that's what you can do. But when I watered, when I was mowing and taking care of people's yards, I was also in charge of their sprinkler box. And sandy soils, I was watering twice a week. I had more water to use because we didn't have that time frame limits, but it is possible to water twice a week and have a nice lawn. This year we don't have that luxury. Just some history. I went to the Weber Basin meeting and I was mad. I was mad in March, and people that know me know I don't get mad. But I was pretty upset when I went, and what's happened is so they have records that go back 400 years, and you ask, how do we know 400 years from now? How do they have records? Okay, you can cut a tree in half, and you can tell how much water that happened that year by the ring size. Okay, and so trees. I wish I could take this microphone over. I don't want to break the city's machine. Okay, where's the magic pen? Okay. Hey, we do have green.
Too late, but.
Okay. Okay, so a tree starts growing in the middle, the first year. I got to remember not to touch the screen. Okay, and so depending on how much water it gets, that sapling, come on. Why does it keep doing that?
Can't press too long.
Oh, is that what it?
Thinking about that.
Okay. Maybe I hate this machine. Okay. So I did some trimmings for my fruit tree pruning class, and I cut off some long stems from last year. And then I was trying to show them the rings, and I was looking at it, and I was like, there's no ring. It's because it was one stem from that year. So it was just a big ring right in the center. So the tree rings start growing. Oop, I can't see. But sometimes they'll be really tight, and sometimes you'll have a big one. And then you'll have some tight ones again. Okay? So whenever you have a big ring, that year they had lots of water in the springtime, and so the trees grew faster and better because they had the water to do that. If it's really tight, they didn't have as much water. And so that's how they can go back 400 years. They have trees that are that old that they've cut and seen, and they can measure and say, this year was a drought year, and this year was an abundant year. So I used to think, how did they know? No one was writing records back then. Now, I don't know how they measured temperature, because they say that we're cooling or heating or whatever, depending on which scientist you listen to now. So, but this is an accurate record that shows how much water we got that year, okay? So at the meeting, Darren Hess showed us how over the last 400 years, we've had these cycles of drought and plenty and drought and plenty. Last year, we were at the bottom of the drought. We're starting to come up. So we've had more rain this year than we had last year, but we're starting with a lot less water. So I'm just going to show the graph. So like, oh, this is cool because we can change colors, right? Okay, so we have a drought, and our reservoirs are at this level, but, does that change color? This year we've had more rain, but our reservoirs are below what they were last year. And so that's why we're in the situation we are. Residences, we use very little water compared to agriculture. And so a lot of people complain, well, why are the farmers getting all this water? In reality, the farmers have been asked to give up 40% of their water rights, so that we have water to drink and to water our lawns with. So if you get mad at anybody, it's, we're actually taking water from the farmers so that we can have any growth this year. So, but our projections for winter, this coming winter, we should have a really good year because we're at the end of that drought. But we're in the worst drought we've had in the last 50 years. And so we're on the upswing of it, so that next year should be a lot better, right? Hopefully, the managers of the Weber Basin learn some things. They know they made some mistakes a couple of years ago, and they're going to try to fix that with some of these restrictions. We're hoping that they have more water this year, but reality is there's no water there. They're not doing this to punish us. I've heard lots of stories about how they're selling it to other people. We live in a state that has a big agricultural community, and they have those rights, and we're lucky to be able to have the water that we do get. So, any questions on that?
All you have to do is go to the reservoirs.
Yeah, and you can see it. Yeah, and some reservoirs. So one of the guys at the meeting, he's from Bear River. Anyway, they get their water from Bear Lake. He goes, yeah, we don't have the same problems you guys have down here because they have more water up there. They got more snow. And down south, some of the other parts of the state have better water situation than we do. But the reason that Roy is on, they have early water rights. Clearfield, some of those in Davis have some early water rights. And unfortunately, we don't have those early water rights. And one thing that when I talked to Darren, because I suggested that they turn the water on in April and turn it off earlier, like in August, because we really need the water right now when our trees and shrubs are emerging, and that's when they need it, if they don't have it. And he said, if we turn it on in April, we'll lose 100 acre feet. That's a lot of water. So if you take 100 acres and you take a foot of water. He said, we'll lose that in 1 week just because people will be watering in April like it's July. And so it makes sense, but you know, it doesn't help me. I'm using house water to water my nursery. And so I can't wait for Monday. Monday can't come soon enough for me. So, but that doesn't mean we go out and just waste it. The water comes on. Don't just go out and water your lawns like crazy, because we still have some restrictions, even though we've had lots of rain. So, any other questions? Hopefully this was worth your time. And again, when we do have more water, if you'll follow these principles, you're going to have a lot better, healthier lawns and healthier plants.
Probably more mature trees, and in about 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
but they're hurt for water. We haven't had enough rain.
Yeah, so
How long should I water them?
So that depends on how big they are. And again, there's not a magic formula. You need to give them, but your mature trees should be getting some water from the groundwater. When we water our lawns, we really aren't watering those trees. But if you went out once a month and gave them a good soaking, you know, if you left the hose on for an hour or half hour, I don't want to get in trouble with Weber Basin, but your hose is putting out a lot less water than a sprinkler system, wasting it all over the ground. So, and they talked about hand watering trees and shrubs. Your trees and shrubs are going to do a lot better for keeping moisture in the area than an open lawn with nothing around it. So if you have to water one thing instead of trying to water your lawn, I would water my trees and shrubs over grass.
Now, on that, how it says 20 minutes for the.
Sprays. Mm-hmm.
And then 20 minutes for the others, you know, you do that once a week. And then it said, once a week, water the trees and shrubs. Now, is that two separate things? You can water the grass
Yeah, so
and then,
they have a magic, I guess they look at a map and it says, this person owns an acre, and so an acre should only need this much water to keep its landscape green. So I have a nice acre, but half of it's under a building, and I've got driveways and stuff that I don't water. And so they tell me I'm under my water budget, and I'm like, well, why does my lawn not look so good? Because I'm following the restrictions, you know. But that's where if you hand water your trees and shrubs or use the drip system, it's going to be more efficient than using those sprinklers and use a lot less. But use the tools that they have. If you can go online and see what your meter's saying that you're at, I don't know how they're going to, you know, they say this year they're going to really be sticklers and come after people. But because I know there are people, as soon as that water comes on, they're going to be watering every day. They don't care. Unfortunately. Yeah. And if COVID didn't teach us one thing, it taught us that people are going to do what they want. So, Dave?
Since I'm on a meter, I can look at what I did last year. And the drips use like a tenth of the water that the lawn did.
Yeah.
So just as contrast, if you're hand watering trees and shrubs, you can get them plenty of water and still be way under budget.
Right. And that's why I would encourage not just flipping the strip, but flipping your whole front yard, because, you know, your grass is wasting water, because, you know, no matter how much ranch dressing you put on it, it doesn't taste very good. So, anything else, Matt?
I think, well, I just want to say, yeah, round of applause for Kim.
Emily taught me how to use this drafted board.
Yeah, I just want to personally say thank you to Kim. He reached out to Mayor Vanderwood, said, hey, I'm worried about it. I get a lot of these questions. Can I come and do a presentation? And so Mayor Vanderwood sent it over to me and says, please, Matt, let's get this done. So appreciate Kim coming out and doing this. He's doing it free, like you said, not making any money on it. And just to let you know, we did record this. It's going to be on our YouTube channel. We'll put links on our website and Facebook page. If anybody you know could benefit from this but weren't here, let them know it will be available and they can give us a call and we can get them hooked up with that. Just from a personal experience, I think I told Kim, I moved into my house 2 years ago in October, and unfortunately the person who lived there before treated it like a golf course. He watered it 3 times a day, every day of the week and mowed it 3 times a week. And so you can only imagine how this very shallow root system just went into just catatonic shock last year during the drought. And we're weaning it out. It's looking good, but we're doing some many of these things, and we're looking at Flip the Strip as well. And West Haven's not the only one who hasn't adopted. I live in West Point, and they haven't adopted it yet. So I need to get on my city manager down there.
3 or 4 cities.
I know. So, and you'll notice just as you start implementing these things, it'll be amazing how well your grass responds. You saw the parks last year in June. They looked like death warmed over. But they started responding because we found out we were watering them too much. As a city, we just pour the water on and expect them to green up. You traumatize grass. It doesn't need to be drowned. And I appreciate Kim giving those. And so please champion those kind of things in your own yards, and get us through this drought and just make our city and your own properties look great. So it's going to be a little brown tinged, but I think we can get through fairly good if we become wise waterers. So once again, just a round of applause for Kim. Thank you, Kim. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.